A federal judge in California has ordered the Environmental Protection Agency to address the potential impacts of fluoride in drinking water because high levels could affect children's IQ levels.
I've said before, and I'll say it again, that perhaps the most troubling effect of the last 4 years for me is that now I wonder what, if anything delivered to us from on high I can trust. You know that thing about, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. That's become my preferred mode of operation. It turns out, wouldn't you know, that even brushing your teeth in tap water might not necessarily be as safe as a person might think. Brushing your teeth. I've read about the health threat posed by fluoride for years now, and the confirmation or the amplification of the threat just builds and builds. An independent journalist called Derek Brose, Derek happens to be a friend of mine, we've spoken at length on numerous occasions about matters relating to health and well-being. Derek published a piece this week with the title, "Fluoride poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children," according to a US federal court. Reduced IQ in children. I ask you, dumbing down moves from conspiracy theory to potential science fact. Quote, "On Tuesday, a federal court in California found that fluoridation of water at 0.7 milligrams per litre poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children. The new ruling, issued by Judge Edward Chen, noted that the finding does not conclude with certainty that fluoridated water is injurious to public health, but does find there is an unreasonable risk of such injury. This risk is sufficient to require the EPA to enact a regulatory response," Chen wrote. The decision is the latest ruling in an 8-year legal battle between the US Environmental Protection Agency, that's the EPA, and the Fluoride Action Network, FAN. Here is no less a figure than Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the subject.
I think fluoride is a poison. My son was in the hazardous waste industry, and he had to take an exam, and that if a fluoride truck crashes on the highway, they have to clear the highway for miles around, and people come in Tyvek suits and respirators and gloves to do the cleanup. And it's a toxic it's a toxic byproduct of certain chemical process and oil industry process. And for many years, those industries, it was costing them thousands of dollars per drum to get rid of them. And then they came up with the idea, why don't we put it in the water supply? And they did that, and it causes cancers. Of course, it causes your bones to deteriorate, and it causes severe IQ loss. And last week, a group that I'm associated with won a 7-year lawsuit against EPA on fluoride that I think will result in the fluoride being removed from all the water supplies in this country.
It's the matter-of-factness of Bobby Kennedy's tone that I find most troubling there. You can tell by the way he's phrasing it, the cadence of his piece, that he's known this for a long time. There's an almost a sense of frustration about it. Yes, we all know this. That's the tone. That this information is out there and really not for debate. Derek Brose continues in his piece, "The EPA must now initiate a rulemaking process to determine what regulation they will implement to lower or eliminate the risk posed by water fluoridation. The EPA is likely to appeal the decision, but could also drag out the rulemaking process for years. The Fluoride Action Network believes the most effective way to eliminate this risk is to end water fluoridation and ban the practice altogether. In our view, attempts by the EPA to appeal or delay this ruling will only result in harm to hundreds of thousands of additional children, particularly those whose families are unable to afford expensive reverse osmosis or distillation filtration of their tap water," wrote Stuart Cooper, Executive Director for the Fluoride Action Network. Judge Chen's ruling includes several strong statements which make it clear his court has no doubt water fluoridation is causing harm even at the levels currently recommended by the US health agencies. These statements conflict with the claims of the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and lobbying groups like the American Dental Association. The court finds that fluoridation of water at 0.7 milligrams per litre, the level presently considered optimal in the United States, poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children, Chen wrote. I can't process that language. Reduced IQ in children on account of fluoride in the tap water that is ubiquitous and all around them. To carry on with the piece, Chen goes on to note that there is little dispute regarding the hazard fluoride poses to human health. Indeed, EPA's own expert agrees that fluoride is hazardous at some level of exposure, and ample evidence establishes that a mother's exposure to fluoride during pregnancy is associated with IQ decrements in her offspring. Judge Chen's statement regarding fluoride exposure during pregnancy reinforces statements made by multiple expert witnesses presented by the FAN during the trials. One such witness was Dr. Howard Hugh. In February, Hugh told the court that babies in the third trimester typically pull calcium from the mother's bones as they develop their skeletal structure. If a mother is receiving fluoride, this will be stored in her bones. When her child begins pulling minerals from the mother, it will also receive fluoride via the placenta. Following his testimony to the court, Dr. Howard Hugh confirmed to TLAV that he believes fluoride is a neurotoxin. A neurotoxin. Yes, I would say that in my view, the evidence is quite persuasive that there is a negative impact of fluoride exposure on the neurodevelopment of children, particularly the research that's been coming out in prenatal exposure. Now, like Robert Kennedy Jr. said, this has been a story, one way or another, since the 1950s. The first soundings of awareness of the problem are a lifetime old. In the past, fluoride as it's used in drinking water is acquired from the phosphate industry, making fertilizer and so on. And in the past, during the process, when the industry let the gases escape into the atmosphere, vegetation in the surrounding area became scorched. Crops, agricultural crops, were destroyed. Cattle were crippled. Farmers noticed at first. Something mysterious burned the peppers, burned the fruit, dwarfed and shriveled the grains, damaged everything that grew. Something in the air destroyed the crops. Anyone could see it. They noticed it first in 1961, again in 62. Worse each year. Plants that didn't burn were dwarfed, grain yields cut in half. Finally, a greater disaster revealed the source of the trouble. A plume from a silver stack, once the symbol of Dunville's progress, spreading for miles around. Poison, fluorine. It was determined by veterinarians. There was no doubt. What happened to the cattle was unmistakable and broke farmers' hearts. Fluorosis, swollen joints, falling teeth, pain until cattle lie down and die, hundreds of them. The cause, fluorine poisoning from the air. And what the industry did to cope with that first stage of the problem was put what they called wet scrubbers into chimneys, and these were pollution control devices that caught the fluoride gases that were occurring during the industrial production of commercial fertilizer. And it appeared like a kind of a crust, a solid. And once it had been gathered in this way, the fluoride acid, which is hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is a classified hazardous waste, it put in barrels, big drums, and it was sold unrefined to communities across the country. And those communities, this is material that you couldn't legally dump. You couldn't put it in a landfill. You had to have it specially dealt with. But Instead, it was turned into a profitable product in its own right. It was literally magically transformed from something toxic and hazardous into a profitable product because communities had it added to their water supplies as the primary source of fluoride for water fluoridation on the grounds that, it might stop tooth decay. Imagine the sort of conversations that might have taken place in the boardrooms of phosphate fertilizer companies. The stuff coming out of our chimneys is killing the cattle, it's killing crops. So we get in trouble for that. Don't give me problems, give me solutions. Well, we've fitted scrubbers to the chimneys and it catches the fluoride as a crust, and so we pile it into drums. What, and then dump it in the river? Well, not exactly. We fill drums with the fluoride and it's illegal to dump that anywhere because it's super toxic, but we can sell it. Who to? Councils. What do the councils do with it? They put it in their public water supply and say it stops tooth decay. Give that man a cigar. It beggars belief. This is the reality. Now, obviously the cases cited here are in the United States of America, where fluoridation of the water supply is a relative commonplace. Drinking water in Scotland, where I live, it does not have fluoride added to it. Fluoride is naturally present in some drinking water because it's there in the geology. It's the luck of the draw in that respect, whether or not the water that ends up in your reservoirs and ends up in your taps has acquired some fluoride from the geology that it's passing through. But, and this is an important but, more than 6 million people in England are drinking water to which fluoride has been added. 6 million, 6.1 million. Fluoride is a toxin. That much is certain. Depends on amounts, but it's toxic. According to the US, according to RFK Jr., according to a slew of scientists, fluoride is a neurotoxin. And the talk in the United States, therefore, is of the possibility at least of an outright ban. All I'm saying, here in the UK, we need to know more. And we need a broad-ranging conversation about the whole subject of fluoride. I would say it's that simple.